Hello. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Schwarzpanzer 58. So, two things before this video. Uh, Someone did mention the mic quality. Yes, I do know my mic quality is bad. I am looking at getting a new mic, so hopefully the audio quality will improve. Yes, I do know the quality is bad. I do check the videos. But other than that, also, last night or yesterday, I said on the M4Yo video, this tank is trash and it's terrible. After playing the tank quite a few battles, I have revised my opinion. I don't think it's trash and terrible. By the way, that opinion was based on my previous experience playing the tank, which had the exact same stats it has now, and I had a terrible time playing it. Also, just because its stats do just look a lot worse than the Panzer 58. However, in actuality, what this tank is a Panzer 58 that trades out a bit of gun stats and a bit of mobility stats in order to be able to gain better frontal armor, better turret armor, and better side armor. Uh, and it is a worthy trade-off. It's not a better tank than the Panzer 58, but it is a different tank, and that armor does really make quite a bit of difference. It's a bit of a shame that you're forced to trade out one provision slot for enhanced sandbag armor just to get 1,507 hit points, and meanwhile the Panzer 58 has 1,508 without needing sandbag. So, don't really like how Wargaming balances with those provisions, but oh well. But yeah, how you get the Schwarzpanzer is going to be by a quest. This is the loyalty quest reward for 20,000 battles. Basically, what that means is once you reach 20,000 battles in game, you'll get a quest which says to win one battle. And after you win one battle, you'll get a choice either between the Schwarzpanzer 58 or a Tier 8 certificate. I would say go for this tank. Despite it not being anything amazing or anything too special, we don't know whether these loyalty quest rewards will ever be back in the future. And even though you may not like it now, or you may not want it at all now, and even though it may never be buffed to a point where you do want it, you never know. Maybe some point in the future you might go, oh, I wish I'd got that tank. It never came back in the store or anything. It was only available when I got to 20,000 battles. So you never know. Also, all the tanks in the certificate, they're always in mystery boxes. They're always in collect 'em all containers. They're always appearing in the shop. You can always get them from mystery certificates when they do appear in bundles, draws, or events. So really, it's not that special compared to this, where we don't know if it will ever be back. But yeah, that is the tank. Let's get into the stats. So, of course, there is a review on my website. It will be under the German tank section, but also for the moment, when this video releases, it will be on the site homepage. So getting right into its armor. Firstly, let's check out its armor against a tier 8 level of penetration. So in this case, it is 210mm AP, which is the level of roughly fairly good penetration of a tier 8 medium. It is slightly above average, especially considering how many tanks in tier 8 have between 180 to 200mm. But you can see here, the turret armor is pretty good, especially when you compare it to a Panzer 58, which I actually haven't done. I should probably go ahead and show you what the Panzer 58's armor profile looks like, because these two are basically the exact same tank, just with different stats. So this one's a bit of an older review, so you can see that the armor images are a bit different. No idea why my page is zoomed in so much, but here you can see the Panzer 58. It's the other tank, it's not the tank we're talking about today. You can see the sort of armor profile that the Panzer 58 has against 181mm of penetration in this image. Now compare it to the Schwarzpanzer, which is facing a higher level of penetration, but still has better armor. You can see that there are some small weak points next to the gun mantlet, but they're pretty hard to hit considering this tank has a fairly small turret and it is just quite a good angle. On top of this, despite the hull not looking too much different to the Panzer 58, it is actually stronger, and I'll show that in a minute. So here you can see when you do turn the tank, the sides are a little bit red, but it's not going to make much of a difference. In fact, if you check it out on Blitzkit, you'll see how easily penetrated the sides are, and that's just due to those tracks being module armor, which does ruin the side armor. Uh, but basically, not too much changes when you turn the hull against this level of penetration. One more thing to note, the cupolas are a bit troll on the edges, and they are quite small, so that is something quite nice. Even though they are weak points, it's not really too much of an issue in battles when you are using gun depression, because they are relatively strong. So next, switching to premium ammo, you can see the hull doesn't change, but the turret does. So you can now penetrate right through the gun mantlet, and that's not fake grey. You can penetrate through that very easily with most tier 8 tanks. And of course, the turret cheeks themselves do get slightly weaker. But other than that, there's not much change. And of course, when you do turn the turret to the side, it becomes weak. But of course, that happens with many tanks. Next, I'll show you the armor of the tank against tier 7 levels of penetration. This is where it gets pretty interesting. Against tier 8, it looks like its armor on the hull is no better than the regular Panzer 58. But then you take a look against tier 7, and you realize, oh, the hull armor is actually pretty reliable. And that is actually the case. So against 155 penetration here, you can see the upper plate is not penetrable at all, basically. And of course, when you do angle the hull, it does become stronger on the upper plate. One thing to note, when you angle the hull, despite it showing up as red, again, if you shoot the tracks, it will go right through. The tank also does have this shoulder, which does mean if you angle the hull, it can be penetrated there. Once again, note the cupolas, they are fairly strong, especially against this tier 7 tank. Next, when you switch to premium ammo against tier 7s, you can see there's still some red on the upper plate, and especially when you turn the hull. So it does still have some pretty good armor, even against premium ammo. And remember, if you do go hull down, you use gun depression, that frontal hull armor does actually become quite strong. In fact, if we look at it on Blitzkit, you'll see, using gun depression, you can see how good the upper plate is, and then switch to HE just because the other shells have normalization. Yeah, 200 at its weakest, and then up to 260 at the stronger areas, which is very good for a medium tank in tier 8. But essentially, this tank, it's got good hull armor against tier 7s, it's got good turret armor against tier 8s. Against tier 9s, its turret armor is less reliable. I would say don't rely on the turret at all against tier 9s, just because tier 9s have more penetration than you have on premium ammo, and you can see when switching to premium ammo, your mantlet does become weak, and the turret cheeks as well. So it's unreliable against tier 9s, especially if they can hit the weak points easily. But of course, they also have higher penetration on premium ammo. But next, getting into the gun, this tank mounts a fairly similar gun to the regular Panzer 58. In fact, a lot of its stats are almost the same, just very slightly toned down. So alpha damage is 230 on AP, 195 on APCR, and 280 on HE. So 230 is actually a very unique alpha damage. No other tank in the game has 230, which means it's a bit hard to compare, but it's just 5 more than the other 90mm guns, which have 225 alpha, which gives this very normal damage. Reload is 5.8, which gives it 2,359 DPM. That DPM is not bad, but it's not great either. It's just unimpressive, fairly, especially for having 230 alpha. Next, penetration, 202, which is 10mm less than the regular Panzer 58. APCR with 245, that is 13 less, or 14 less than the regular Panzer 58, and HE is 45. Now, the reason I'm pointing out the regular Panzer 58 is because it's very comparable. This one just has very slightly toned down stats, and it changes it for turret armor, so it does actually make a bit of a difference. Penetration, that is fine. Really, compared to the majority of tanks in tier 8, this is just average. If you think about a T-44, which has 10mm less APCR pen and almost 20mm, actually, yes, 22mm less AP pen, this is fine, especially when you combine it with an okay aim time of 3.2. Its base aim time isn't so impressive, but it's still okay. And dispersion, which is, again, it's okay, it's average, 0.33. Another quite unique number, since usually the numbers in game follow a certain pattern. This one doesn't. Gun handling is decent, however, it's not great. This is the most unimpressive aspect of the gun. 0.16 when moving the tank, 0.14 when turning, and then 0.06 when turning the turret. Uh, Turning the turret, that's very impressive, but the other two are not so much. Gun depression is 9, which is actually great. Consider that this tank has good turret armor and quite a usable hull, especially when it uses gun depression. This gun, while not impressive, it's okay. It's nothing too great, it's nothing too bad, it's perfectly usable. Also, don't forget, I haven't mentioned it yet, but this tank does have reticle calibration, so that helps to boost your accuracy even further than it is in these stats. So your top forward speed is 48. Moving to mobility, top forward speed is 48 kilometers per hour. That's not special, but it's not bad. It's 2 kilometers worse than the Panzer 58, and it's slightly below average, but that's fine. 18 in reverse is a bit disappointing since 18 versus 20 does actually make quite a bit of difference, and 18 is a bit not so good, especially when this tank doesn't really have all that amazing hull armor. Hull traverse is 67, that is quite good, but on medium terrain it's 51, which, while not bad, is quite mediocre for tier 8. It's definitely not bad for a medium overall, but definitely nothing special. Actual in-game acceleration rate is 18.8, that is fine. It weighs 38 tons with a 713 horsepower engine. And of course, the actual real acceleration is exactly the same on hard terrain due to its terrain coefficient of 1, and on medium terrain it's 14.5, which is poor, but it's not abysmal. And that will be due to the 1.3 medium terrain resistance, which a lot of the tanks recently have had this level of terrain resistance difference. But yeah, 14.5, it's not good for a medium tank that doesn't have all that much armor. You'll see that the Titan 54D, which had tons of frontal armor, about 280 millimeters on its strongest spaced armor plate, has roughly the same sort of acceleration as this. So yeah, it's definitely not impressive mobility, and probably the biggest drawback of this tank will be its mobility. So next, I'll get into equipment, the provisions and consumables. Very quickly, gun rammer, because this tank, despite not having all that good penetration, not the highest level in tier 8, it's not bad. It's average penetration. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly usable. And remember, you can activate this consumable to become pinpoint accurate and just deal with weak points very easily. Of course, if you do want to have more penetration, there's nothing wrong with using calibrated shells, but you do put yourself at quite a big disadvantage in terms of DPM, since it will lower down to 2213, which in the current meta, where a ton of 90mm guns in tier 8 have been buffed, 2200 is quite poor, and you will struggle to deal with enemies in the same tier. Next, optics. The view range of this tank is quite good. It's almost 300 meters. Unfortunately, you do have to drop a bit of that view range because of sandbag armor, but oh well. Engine accelerator, as said before, mobility is the most unimpressive trait of this tank, and despite everything, its traverse speed is still fine. Next, enhanced armor or improved assembly. Both can work. If you want to use improved assembly, it gives you an additional 55 hit points. And this will be useful for tier 9 battles where your armor will not do too much anyway. However, enhanced armor is still worth using because your hull does still have some armor. This will help against lower penetration tier 8 tanks, for example, the T-44, and of course against those tier 7 tanks. Also, when you are using gun depression, it will improve the turret and hull fairly noticeably. So personally, for me, I am using enhanced armor. I have tried both, and both work fine. Next, gun lane drive. Definitely use gun lane drive because its base aim time, while not bad, it's nothing impressive. And also, its base shell velocity is actually very impressive, 1,100 meters per second on armor piercing, which makes it, I believe, the highest shell velocity medium in Tier 8. At least on its standard ammo, especially with AP shells, not APCR. But yeah, next, vertical stabilizer. I'm using this because I have found it to have actually very nice aim time when you do use vertical stabilizer. Refined gun, of course, can work because of this tank's sort of average dispersion, but I am using the stabilizer because the gun handling of this tank isn't anything too impressive either. Both of these are really equal in terms of how good or bad they are on this tank. As said before, gun stats on this tank are all just pretty average. Consumable delivery system or high-end consumables, this will be down to whether you want to use adrenaline and reticle calibration more often, or if you want to use them for longer. I have decided to use them more often in battle because this tank has just a fast reload and low alpha, so a lot of the times you'll need to be re-engaging in different fights. One more thing to note, I have both the consumable delivery system and cooldown booster on. The cooldown of reticle calibration is less than 40 seconds. That is very quick. It is very nice, and it allows you to use it in so many situations because the downtime between fights will generally allow you to use this quite often. And the next, to provisions, of course, use chocolate because that's 10% food. It gives basically everything on your tank a boost. Of course, improved fuel because by far the most unimpressive trait of this tank is its mobility, and then of course sandbag armor because it's just a ton of free hit points. It's definitely more worth using than either chocolate, standard fuel, or a protective kit, just because those hit points are so valuable. If you don't have this and you don't have improved assembly, your base HP is only 1,370, which is unimpressive. So I have got two great battles to show you. And they have to be that way because, unfortunately, despite what I thought about this tank, it does actually perform pretty well in battle. And also, the sort of average games which I had in this tank don't show the tank's capabilities as well. These two best battles I had in the tank do actually show what this tank is all about very well. So, Battle 1 on Yamato Harbor. Unfortunately, my RU-251 isn't a great player. He goes immediately to the heavy tank side, so I'm left holding base C on my own. Also, one thing to note, I completely forgot to put camo on in this game because I had just taken some armor screenshots, where I always take the camo off. So here you can see I'm going hull down. It works well because this tank has a strong turret, and against a tank with low penetration like the Progetto, my upper plate will also be quite good. Here, seeing the E50, I decide to not push that same side, and I decide to pull in to cover a bit more, though I am still being a bit wary of the tank destroyers at the back. And then I thought the E50 had pushed, but then I don't spot him, so I'm a bit confused what's happening, and then he appears right in front of me, so yeah. Unfortunately, I thought I might be able to use my turret armor there, but the E50, if I can just check, the E50 penetrates me somewhere. There's no hitbox. Oh well. It seems like he penetrated me in the turret anyway. But here I'm getting a bit lucky, since neither of these tanks are wanting to push, and that Progetto is just letting me farm him as he caps the base. And here you can see its DPM doing perfectly fine against that Progetto. And now I see the ISU, so I know there is a tank destroyer back there. There I take a shot into the cupola, which is a nice shot by the Progetto, but he's fairly accurate and he's not moving, so not too impressive there. And then a massive shot by the ISU, and of course the ISU with his 286mm of penetration will have no issue dealing with really any area of armor on this tank. So having taken that shot and seeing the E50 on quite high hit points, I decide I'm going to leave that position because it's just not going to work out well for me. getting 2 shots quite quickly there. You can see I used the reticle calibration to shut down that Jagdtiger without much aiming. Also, a bit of a lucky high roll, which is nice. That is something you'll get with this tank, despite only having 5 more alpha damage than something like a Pershing or a T-25 Pilot. It does make a little bit of difference. So here you'll see my gun is actually performing quite alright. In terms of the accuracy, I was able to deal with that Progetto despite my reticle calibration having run out, and then here comes the E50. There you can see I bounce his shot due to him not having the gun depression to aim down on my hull and having to shoot at my fairly strong turret. So far, blocked 800 damage, which is definitely not bad for a medium tank. Consider a lot of medium tanks just don't block damage very well. It is pretty impressive despite 800 not seeming like that much. Here, notice the mobility of this tank. You can see how slow I am going up hills and stuff, and my top speed maxing out at 48. So here I'm just going to go for the ISU, trying to get the last bits of damage, and I'm going to activate that reticle calibration. So there you can see my aim time is much improved, he misses, and my dispersion is very nice. In fact, it's down to 0.231 dispersion when I am using the reticle calibration. So there again, reticle calibration coming in a bit clutch. Without having to aim on that ISU, I shut him down. So that battle showed the tank hull down quite well, showed its relatively okay DPM, and you could see myself repositioning in battle, which did show the mobility a bit. It's not great mobility, but it's enough. It's not as bad as something slow, like 122 TM, for example. But yeah, an ace tanker in that battle. I made almost 200,000 credits, and that is with the credit booster on, but remember, Top Gun and Mastery Badge will add credits. Also got this medal, which is destroy 2 higher tier enemy tanks. But yeah, next I have one more battle, which is on Canyon. This is an absolute farm fest of a game. I don't know how it happened, but yeah. So in this battle I did remember to put my camo on, and I'm going to decide to try and go into base B, because unlike the Panzer 58, this isn't just troll armor. This has reliable turret and fairly reliable upper plate armor when it does use gun depression, which means you can sort of dominate a ridgeline like on base B on this map. Considering there's only a light tank on the enemy team, I decide it will be a good idea to go there. There's also a Lorraine going with me, and with his strong turret armor, he'll really sort of push me out of this position. But here you can see the T-54 lightweight is spotted. I'm expecting there's going to be some tanks crossing to A, or at least if there aren't, I'll be able to not spot them and then find that out. But then here the M5Yo also decides to come up to this position, so I think I'm going to move and try and flank that T-54 lightweight. So here again you can see sort of the mediocre mobility, fairly slow coming down that hill and then up this small ridge. There you can see relatively unimpressive penetration against the strong armor of the KV-4. But yeah, here I'm going to push around and try and flank the KV-4 so I can win this side of the map and then flank the rest of the enemy team. So here you can see I'm going to use APCR because I can't see his armor, and also because the fence will take out 25mm of my penetration. Having reticle calibration on, you can see very accurate, really not much need to aim, and now I'm just very easily putting AP into his lower plate. Here I may make a bit of a misplay, shoot his tracks, which really aren't penetrable because his sides are strong, but oh well. The dispersion works out in the end. So here I noticed the AMX-50, but then he moves down so I can't get a shot. And I'm a bit wary of the Waffenträger, which is sitting over in the corner in that river, so I'm being a bit careful pushing out against this IS-3. But here you can see with Adrenaline activated, I'm doing quite good damage against the IS-3 fairly quickly. That shot there, a bit unfortunate. That will be down to the lower penetration of this tank compared to the regular Panzer 58, which I have been playing a bit, so was still adjusting to this tank at this time. But here you can see when the enemies aren't just aiming at you and trying to kill you, your gun does rack up damage fairly okay. Also note, in this battle, unlike the previous one, I'm using improved assembly, not enhanced armor, since I was still testing it out. Notice here, I'm going to use the HE ammo against the Waffenträger, who is not using a Spore Liner, which really helps my damage score in this battle. And definitely if you find tanks which aren't using Spore Liner, do use HE, because while this tank's DPM is nothing too impressive, with HE it can get your damage up quite fast. So here are just down to the last 3 tanks on the enemy team, 2 of them heavily armored tier 9s, and you can see sort of with the consumable use, I'm kind of alternating between the adrenaline and the reticle calibration consumable, which is quite nice. It kind of almost gives you a permanent advantage over enemies. It's either DPM or it's accuracy. Of course, it's not quite true because you won't always have them activated, but it is quite nice to sort of have that boost when you want. But yeah, that game, I think 3,800 damage, yeah. 4,200 combined in total. Got the Radley Waters and Oskins, a Top Gun, and an Ace Tanker, which gives me 182,000 credits. So this tank, again, not too bad in terms of credit making. These two are both very good games, but I did play some more average games, and this tank makes okay credits. But yeah, Schwarzpanzer 58. This tank is alright. It's nothing great, it's not terrible either, and it is sort of unique in terms of a German medium tank, because the other ones we have in Tier 8, there's the Kampfpanzer 07 RH. This tank has upper plate armor and a bit of turret armor, but it's not as good as the turret armor on the Schwarzpanzer. The Panzer 58, of course, has troll turret armor and these sort of ricochet angles on the upper plate, but again, it's not as good as the Schwarzpanzer. And then the M48A2, despite its good turret armor, good upper plate armor, it has that big cupola on top. So again, not as good as the Schwarzpanzer's armor. While it's unique among German tanks, it's not so unique among the American tanks because it's actually fairly similar to the T-25 Pilot 1 in terms of its turret armor effectiveness or the M26 Pershing. Also remember about the T-25 Pilot, you can have all these consumables as well, and this tank does have the same, actually slightly higher base HP, with better mobility. So in terms of how unique this tank is, it's nothing that special, but it's not bad, and in terms of a German tank, it is a little bit interesting. I would still say go for this tank in the 20,000 battle loyalty quest, because we don't know if it will be back, even if you don't want it or don't like it now. It may never be back in the future, so go for it. The other tanks in the certificate will be back in the future, and they are always available in certificates. So yeah, that is the Schwarzpanzer 58. Not a bad tank, unlike I initially said. It's okay. Thanks for watching.